There is a kind of quiet reverence we have built around the idea of daily routines. You wake up, check your phone, open a game not to play really, but to do the things, the checklists, the clicks, the motions that suggest progress. Even if nothing is happening, it is ritualized productivity, and in the gacha space, no ritual is holier than the daily quest. You see, in most games, dailies are meant to keep you tethered, just enough to keep the dopamine faucet dripping, but not so much that you question why the sink is dry. It is design inertia, a soft kind of manipulation, and we all play along. Because the stakes are small, a few rolls, a free currency here and there, and maybe some mats. It is harmless. Until it isn't. Because at a certain point, that harmless checklist starts to look less like a game loop and more like an unpaid internship, especially when the thing you are checking in for isn't just limited, it is also random and mandatory. And somehow it is still your fault when it goes nowhere. Nowhere is that more apparent than in Genshin Impact, a game that despite being one of the most successful in the genre, has somehow perfected the art of wasting your time with a straight face. Not maliciously, not even incompetently, just deliberately. You log in, you burn your resin, and you hope that today the dice finally lands your way. They probably won't, and that's okay, because you will be back tomorrow. And that is what today's video is about. It is not just Genshin, mind you. This is not supposed to be a hit piece. It is not unique to one title. The issues we're going to dig into exist across the entire gacha ecosystem. Genshin is just the most visible example, the biggest name, the loudest stage, which makes it the easiest lens through which to understand a problem that is quietly infected an entire genre. This is not made in hate, it is made in criticism, because something is wrong with the way these games handle progression, and it's been wrong for a while. So let's talk about it. The day-to-day in Genshin, it is honestly pretty minimal. You've got your 4 commissions, maybe you check in on your expeditions, spend a few minutes running a ley line or killing a few elite mobs for fun, but the real core of it, where your actual progress lives, is resin. That 200 resin a day is the heartbeat of Genshin's entire system. If you want to do literally anything that counts as an advancement, it is resin. You want to level up your talents? That's resin. You want to level up your characters or need more mora? That's resin. And of course, the crown jewel of frustration, artifacts. Resin governs all of it. And to be fair, this is not a new idea. Most gacha games these days have some form of limited stamina to keep their players pacing themselves. You can't binge the entire game in a week, and Genshin is no different in that regard. The idea is, you log in each day, do your bits of progress, and over time, your account gets stronger. It is not a bad approach in theory, it keeps things manageable, routine. But here is where it starts to fray. When you hit artifacts, that pacing design turns from structured to just exhausting. Because with artifacts, it is not just about time investment anymore, it is about gambling with your time. You're not guaranteed progress. You're not even guaranteed mediocre progress. You can burn a full day's resin and come out with absolutely nothing worth keeping, and you will do it all again tomorrow, and the day after that. So while resin is meant to keep your progression steady, in practice, it often just feels like it's stalling you out. Not because you're being inefficient, not because you're building the wrong characters either. It is just because you didn't roll the dice right that day. And that is what makes artifact farming not just tedious, but uniquely discouraging. Now let's talk about the artifacts itself, or more specifically, how Hoyoverse managed to turn what should be a rewarding gear system into one of the most irritating parts of character progression. Genshin artifacts come in 5 pieces per character. The Flower Feather Sands Goblet Circlet. Each one rolls with a main stat, and then 3 or 4 substats. Every 4 levels, one of those substats will get upgraded at random. You have no say in which one, and if your artifact dropped with 3 substats to start, congratulations. Your 4th is a coin flip too. But what really drags this system down isn't just the randomness, it is how deliberately layered the randomness is. Let's say you want a goblet with elemental damage bonus as the main stat. Those are rare, statistically rarer than the HP and defense goblets you keep getting. The game just quietly weights certain rolls lower, especially for the stats people actually want. Elemental mastery and energy recharge on sands also heavily deprioritized. Then let's say you do get the right main stat. Now it has to come with the correct substats: crit rate, crit damage, energy recharge, maybe a dash of elemental mastery and attack percent. You don't need all 4, but 3 would be nice. And then once you level it, those upgrades have to hit the right stats, and they have to be high rolls. Because yes, crit rate can roll anywhere between 2.7% and 3.9%, and there is nothing stopping you from getting the low end every time. It's like buying a lottery ticket and then spinning a prize wheel to find out how much the prize is worth, and then rolling dice to see if you're allowed to keep it. And since artifacts don't cost primo gems, they instead cost resin, the game's daily rationed energy system. You get 180 resin per day, and each domain run takes 20, and maybe, just maybe, 1 usable artifact if you're lucky. That is an incredibly slow loop. Even if you have been playing for years, your odds of farming artifacts don't improve. You farm just as slowly and just as blindly as someone who started last week.
Run. Hurry up! Dude, the bar's going down! Hurry up! Stop! Go! You're gonna die!
And that is the part that really gets under people's skin. No matter how efficient you are or how much you understand the system, progress is never guaranteed. You can burn 5,000 resin over the course of weeks and come out with nothing usable. And then suddenly, in one afternoon, you might get 2 near perfect pieces back to back. It is not progress, it is just probability. And for a system that plays such a huge role in a character's power level, that stack of control makes it feel less like a build and more like a slot machine. One where the payout isn't even a jackpot, it is just playable. It is not just that artifacts are random, it is how deeply layered that randomness is. Now, randomness on its own isn't a bad thing. A rare item drop can be thrilling, hunting for shinies in Pokemon, getting that perfect IV roll in a roguelike, those are the kind of things that make repetition feel justified. You're not guaranteed a win, but every attempt has a clear path to pay off. And when the stars finally align, it is memorable. Genshin's artifact system, though, takes that exact same sense of anticipation and quietly erodes it with time. This isn't just RNG, it is RNG stacked on RNG, gated by a timer, and required for progression, which is the real kicker, because unlike optional content or side grades, artifacts are core. You need them, so the fun of chance is replaced with the fatigue of inevitability, because eventually, you will need to play the slot machine whether you want it or not. The resin system already sets a hard daily cap on your progress. That is like about 9 attempts, and that's it. And those 9 attempts might get you nothing but plus defense goblets, with flat HP, and crit rate rolls that never roll again. Cool, let's try again tomorrow. And unlike other areas of progression, like talents, levels, even weapon enhancement, artifact farming never accelerates. You don't get more resin at higher adventure ranks, the drop rates are kinda bad, the system doesn't care if this is your 30th character or your first, there is no efficiency curve, it is the same daily treadmill at AR 45 as it is in AR 60. Other games get this right, but that is exactly what Genshin asks you to do, and every time. Even though it is a character collector at heart, you're encouraged to pull, build, and try everyone. The artifact grind slows you down so hard that even whales can't just gear who they want when they want. You might have every unit, but good luck actually using them all. And it's not even just the main stats. Getting crit rate, crit damage, energy recharge, and elemental mastery together on a single artifact is pretty rare. Getting them all to roll well, practically a lottery ticket. And when the system hands you something beautiful, let's say crit rate circlet with perfect substats, and then proceeds to dump 4 upgrades into flat attack and HP, it is not frustrating because you made a mistake, it is frustrating because the game doesn't let you make progress. This breaks a pretty foundational rule of good game design. The player should feel like they're getting somewhere. Maybe not fast, maybe not with every run, but somewhere. And artifacts don't do that. You can log in, you can do your dailies, you can burn all your resin, and come out of the other end with nothing of value. Not a single upgrade. And that is not just unproductive, it is demoralizing. There are gacha games out there where the gacha is the only source of randomness. Everything else is deterministic. You farm mats, you ascend, you know exactly how many runs until you are done. Genshin gives you that in some places, leveling talents, but then completely breaks that rhythm when it comes to artifacts. And that is a big reason people burn out, because you can plan your week, you can optimize your routes, but if the game decides to not give you a usable drop for days or weeks on end, that is it. You've done everything right and still gone nowhere. And the burn doesn't stop there, it spreads. There is a scalability problem, or more specifically, how the artifact systems completely collapses under the weight of Genshin's expanding roster. You see, the idea of building a character in Genshin isn't necessarily complicated. You get your stats, you optimize them, and then you move on. The problem is, you don't actually get to reuse any of that effort. Every new character is a fresh slate, and that would be fine if artifacts weren't built around 2 things: intense RNG and character-specific set bonuses that are borderline mandatory. There are a total of 56 different artifact sets in the game right now. Not subtypes, not alternate bonuses, farm from 0 sets. And many of them are so narrowly designed they feel tailor-made for 1 or 2 characters at most. So even when you do get a good piece, it often becomes a trophy instead of a usable gear. Nice stats, shame no one can wear you. And because set bonuses are so disproportionately powerful,
Hey, so I see you're trying to level up your crit rate. Well, that's a weird way to spell defense.
you're basically locked into a specific domain if you want to bring out the best in the character. You are not farming mats. You are not farming stats anymore. You are farming brands. You don't want want just a feather with a crit rate and crit damage. You want one with high rolls, over 40 crit value. But you won't, of course, get any of those. You will get flat defense, which no one asks for again. Even when you get lucky into something solid, let's say a cracked flower with a perfect substats, you're probably going to throw it away if it's on the wrong set. Not because the stats are bad, but because Genshin's system has no middle ground. Set bonuses are either on or off, and the off-meta options just don't keep up. Now yes, most players treat the goblet as the flex slot. That is the one piece people are willing to compromise on because elemental damage bonuses are so hard to find. But that still leaves you needing 4 set consistent pieces that all happen to roll the right way. It is not much of a consolation when you are throwing away dozens of artifacts just to patch together one functional build. And this is where the system really starts to fall apart. Genshin encourages collecting characters, right? But actively punishes you for trying to build them. The moment you want to add someone into your new team, you are back to square one. You don't just need to level them, you need to gear them. And that means diving back into the same domains. Again, for artifacts that are tied to just them, what you end up with is a massive pile of almost great artifacts sitting in your inventory, completely useless to anyone else. All this combines to form a system that feels less like a progression tree and more like a slot machine with a daily limit. But you know what's funny though? For a system that demands so much from the player, Genshin gives them surprisingly little agency. It tells you what to do, how often to do it, and what you're allowed to get out of it. And it is not a suggestion, it is a schedule. And it doesn't matter how much money you throw at it. Even whales, people who essentially turn this into a second mortgage, cannot meaningfully shortcut the artifact grind. Sure, they can max out characters instantly, snag every limited weapon, get full constellations by dinner, but artifacts still stuck on the mercy of a 20 resin domain that spits out maybe 2 pieces per run, most of which are destined for the trash can. You can't even swipe your card to buy better odds, yet you never know with Genshin Impact, to be honest. And that is where the real problem is. Genshin doesn't just ask you to gamble, it asks you to gamble once a day with capped resin, limited rolls, and no fallback system. It is RNG and scarcity. You get the worst of both worlds. If we must keep the artifact RNG, which let's face it, we will, then the resin limits need to go. Let players grind themselves into oblivion if they want, or keep the cap, you know? But give us some kind of deterministic crafting system, like a salvage and reshape feature, just, you know, pick one. Because right now, we are stuck in a purgatory of non-choice. And that is where players start to disengage. Not because they are tired of the grind, but because they realize the grind isn't even theirs. They are not progressing, they are waiting. Progress starts to feel less like a reward for effort and more like a favor from the game. And that is when people stop trying, not out of frustration, but out of apathy. Now, to be fair though, it is not like Genshin has completely ignored the feedback. They do listen once or twice a year. They have added systems that attempt to soften the artifact grind, but attempt is the key word here. Because while these updates look promising on paper, most of them land squarely in that frustrating middle ground of almost helpful, but not actually satisfying. Take this Sanctifying Elixir, for example. Introduced in version 5.0, it was marketed as a way to give players a little more control over their artifact drops. And sure, at a glance, that sounded good. You choose the set, you choose the main stat, and you even get to pick 2 substats. Want a hydro goblet with a crit rate and crit damage? Hell yeah, brother! Crafting just 1 goblet costs 4 elixirs, and elixirs are rare. You might get enough to craft 1 or 2 pieces per patch, and that is if you're playing regularly and not missing a step. So it is not really a fix, it is a pressure valve, a way to feel like you're making progress without actually accelerating anything. And the kicker? Even after you pick your substats, the 3rd and 4th ones are still random, and leveling the artifact is also still random. That goblet you spent a month collecting elixirs for, it can still roll twice into flat defense and once into flat attack, and congratulations, you have just created your very own disappointment. Version 5.5 tried to address that too, by guaranteeing 2 upgrades into your chosen substats by the time an artifact hits plus 20. And yeah, that is better than nothing, but it also feels like being handed a free coffee after your house burned down. The remaining rolls can still go wherever they want, and if you're hoping for anything beyond the bare minimum usability, you are still at the mercy of chance. And then came version 5.7, Dust of Enlightenment, which is basically a substat reroll item. You pick a maxed artifact and prioritize a substat you want more of, crit rate for example, and crit damage. The game rerolls the stats, and you are guaranteed 2 rolls within the 2 substats that you chose. And again, that is a nice idea, but in practice, we watched it live. They showcased the system on stream, and the reroll landed twice into flat defense. Like, come on bro, that is the footage you went with? It was the most honest demonstration they have ever given. I respect it, but goddamn. And this is the pattern. Every update promises a little more control, a little more fairness, but none of them actually break the cycle. You are still locked artifact behind resin, you are still gambling. None of these systems fix the core issue. Artifact farming feels bad because it's slow, stingy, and deeply resistant to player agency. The solutions Hoyoverse has added so far don't remove the friction, they just relocate it. And in the process, they create this illusion that progress is more attainable, when really it is just more expensive. And so we end where most Genshin players do, staring at a plus 20 artifact that rolled flat defense 3 times and wondering where the last 3 weeks of our lives went. See, the artifact system isn't just a slow grind, it is a deliberate design decision, one that doesn't just ignore players' time, but arguably exploits it. It takes one of the most basic tenets of RPG progression, build your characters, and wraps it in a time-gated roulette wheel that spits out disappointment more consistently than rewards. The irony is that gacha games thrive on collection. They are built on the idea that you will want new characters, and more importantly, that you will use them. But Genshin quietly decentralizes that. Unless you are willing to wait weeks, like literal weeks, for characters just to get them battle ready, you will probably stick to a small core team. And that is not because you don't want to play with your new toy, it is because you can't. Not without running face first into the same artifact wall again and again and again. Now, some people will say, well, that is just how the live service games work. It is meant to keep you logging in. And well, they're right. This isn't unique to Genshin, but what is unique to how little reciprocity the system offers? You can log in for 30 days, spend your 200 resin like clockwork, and come out no stronger than when you started. It doesn't need to be easy. It doesn't even need to be generous, but it should feel fair, or at the very least, responsive. The game already limits how often you can farm with resin, and that should be the bottleneck. Instead, it is resin plus layered RNG plus character specificity, all stacked in such a way that feels less like progression and more like waiting in line for a ride that might not even show up. When the most time-consuming part of building a character is the least enjoyable and the least consistent, that is not engagement, that is attrition. A system like this doesn't respect your time. It just hopes you will keep showing up anyway. And unfortunately, most of us do. But that is all from me, Glaivekiyo, and I will see you in the next one. Cheers!